Prophet of Time by Joyce Lee. Chapter 3. Damon followed the soft, ethereal chimes of finger cymbals and the tinkle of coins on a hip scarf to the training room of the DeSola compound. He entered the space and watched as Kayla played her zills and danced. The way she was able to seamlessly maintain the rhythm while playing the cymbals attested to the hours she'd spent perfecting her art alone. She shifted and turned as her arms swayed. Damon could see the appeal of dance for the purposes of battle. He hadn't mastered this kind of swift, precise footwork or the ability to control every inch of his body, but he compensated with brute strength. Training was Damon's escape, his way to release his anxiety. Dancing was that for Kayla. Usually Sky would be there playing simple, light tunes on the flute. His music made for something more lively, and they both seemed to enjoy the art of creating something beautiful together. Kayla's expression held nothing but concentration as the early morning light flashed off the metal sewn into her lavender top, hip scarf, and matching loose-fit trousers. He stayed silent until she knelt down in a graceful crouch as the last lingering chimes echoed in the air. She took off the zills as she stood and went to grab the glass of water on the table in the practice area.
It's been a while since I've seen you dance.
Damon approached, and Kayla drank deeply before turning to him.
I've been in the training arena with you ever since you got back.
She met his gaze with a raised brow.
Since somebody suggested that I shouldn't go to the amphitheater for a while, I thought I'd warm up with a dance.
Damon sighed.
I understand why you want to leave. We're all frustrated by this. But do you really think that companion of yours can catch you every time you fall into your visions? Especially the ones he's triggered. Do you have any idea what you might experience with so much exposure to people?
It was the only other excuse he could think of, and it had kept him up last night. If anybody found out what Kayla could do, she could be captured and sold to the highest bidder. The sight, as Kayla called it, had afflicted her since her premature birth. The fact that she knew more intimate details about his life, and of secrets best left buried, was not lost on him. But he did his best not to let it show. He feared the telling of even the slightest hint of what destiny had in store for him. The only reason Kayla was alive today was because of their father's compassion, and the only reason she was not stuck in the deepest chasm of depression was because of Sky's intervention. Resigned sadness radiated from Kayla, even as she smiled at him. She would have fooled Damon if he didn't know her so well.
It's not like I've learned to control my sight at home. The gods know we've tried enough, and Sky can make up an excuse to strangers if it overtakes me. Here, not so much.
Why not leave in another month? We can train here when I'm done with the recruits. You can tell me what plans Celia has been implementing while I was gone.
You will forever be busy with mercenary work, Damon. I do not begrudge you the duties that must be performed, but I need this time for myself. I have only experienced the world through this cursed sight. I'm not living, brother, when it's through other people, so let me go. Can you imagine how it feels to live moments of other people's lives while experiencing this limbo of a life?
Damon placed a hand on her shoulder and met her gaze.
No.
His voice was hoarse in his own ears.
But even after preparing you for the worst, you're still unable to protect yourself.
Fire lit in Kayla's coal-colored eyes, and she pushed her loose ebony hair from her face while shrugging his hold off.
Humans are vulnerable. You might be a battle-hardened warrior, but you experience pain and loss and sorrow. Losing yourself in the arms of woman after woman doesn't change that, brother. I might not be in the habit of repeating my sight to others anymore, but it doesn't mean they don't happen and leave a scar on my soul.
She had to reach up to poke Damon in the sternum as she spoke. Her small stature never stopped her from being fierce. Her words barely registered in his mind as he admired her spirit. In the 16 years of her life, that touched Damon's heart the most. It gave him hope that the anger and hurt wouldn't fester because people were judgmental and cruel. Before he could offer any response, Kayla left through the door and turned right toward the bathing chambers. Sighing, Damon closed his eyes and ran through Kayla's last words. He immediately wished he hadn't. No sister should know about her older brother's escapades, even if she did know why he needed that escape. That control, after all the chaos, blood, and death. The lives of hundreds haunted her, yet she hadn't even lifted a finger to end a single one of them. She was innocent, and he'd been outvoted on a decision that wasn't his to make. He could do nothing more to protect her, but whisper a prayer that Kayla would come out of her journey unharmed. He took a left at the hall toward the library to follow a lead Kayla had inadvertently given him. The compound's library only boasted 3 well-kept bookshelves, but it had the most important information on politics and the history of the desolate isles, Cerelia and Hukonda. Dust motes floated in front of the desk and chairs as the morning light streamed through the open window. Damon looked through the shelves with old titles like The Isles before they became desolate. Equity of Mind, Body, and Spirit, Codes of the Desolate Isles, and the Art of Writing Binding Contracts. Damon wrinkled his nose and skipped the worn copy. Contractual obligations were a boon and a curse to the desolate islanders, and though he was good at reading and finding loopholes in them, he was never great at drafting monotonous documents. At last he found the books he wanted: Temple Hierarchy, The Gods of the Desolate Isles, and Sirad, Gifts from the Gods or Nefarious Otherworlders. That last one was in the dusty bottom corner of the shelf in a sparse section labeled Sirad, and though it might not be relevant, Kayla had brought up Fear and the Unknown the other day. The Sirad were just as shunned by the human race as Kayla was by their people because of a power within them that couldn't be explained. Damon hunkered down to face his worst nightmare: research. An hour after his confrontation with Kayla, the soft patter of sandals on wood alerted Damon that he wasn't alone.
You must be desperate.
Damon turned from his book to see Celia behind him. Academics, politics, and history were in his eldest sibling's repertoire. And though Damon and Kayla didn't shirk their studies, Celia focused on details. She absently traced her fingers along a row of books, only to stop at a black leather-bound volume titled Hukandan Territories and Tribes in gold foiling. She contemplated it for a few seconds before dropping her hand to her side.
Do you know what Kayla is?
Celia's raised brow and the gleam in her eyes told him to expect a whimsical answer. He wasn't disappointed as she took a seat beside him.
Well, for one, she's our sister. She's the daughter of King Brandon and Queen Tatiana. She's our father's jewel. She's a princess, your favourite sibling, and companion to Sky. She is our oracle, and she is a saving grace for us during the droughts. Shall I go on?
Damon placed his thumb and forefinger on his brows and took a deep breath. A sarcastic Celia never gave straight answers, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to laugh or shake Celia for her cool disregard of his questions. Neither reaction ever gave him any real satisfaction or answers, so he settled on more direct questioning.
Yes, but why was she given her sight? What use is her power if they have such a drastic way of debilitating her while she can't even control it? She told us she wanted to leave and find her own way. I just want to know how dangerous that could be for her.
Does it matter? We've tried all we can to help her. You've even gone so far as to act out abduction scenes when she least expects them. It's up to her now. She's been deprived of enough, Damon. Sky's been a good influence on her over the years, and it is only fair for her to go through her exploration with a few caveats.
It hurt Damon to remember how withdrawn Kayla had been as a child, and the slow change Sky had wrought upon her was nothing short of miraculous. But then again, Kayla was a miracle in and of herself. Looking down at the yellowed page he'd been reading, he wanted to tell Celia to forget what he'd said. The book, titled The Gods of the Desolate Isles, was turned to a page he knew well. The god of justice, the deity to whom Damon had pledged upon most, was drawn in black and red ink. A set of scales was in his left hand, and a sword rested flat across his lap. Relaw's ageless features were stern and unwavering, but there was a ring of scarlet surrounding the kohl's that were his pupils. Damon had made vows to fight injustices, but he had no idea what could be done for his sister. It was difficult to sway the public's opinion once the falsehoods had already infected their minds. He turned the page, and the sketch of twin swords crossed atop the goddess of time's throne caught his eyes. Ageless and drawn in accents of black and purple, Samaya's sharp countenance was unwavering. A necklace with an hourglass pendant rested between her breasts, framed by the waterfall of dark hair trailing down her shoulders. Those piercing black eyes with no visible irises, though, they were Kayla's eyes. Damon looked up and found Celia examining him. He felt the distinct tingle of unease as he met Celia's green gaze. He wouldn't get answers from her, but he had his suspicions. Getting up, he stretched and rubbed his stomach, trying to play off his discomfort with the same whimsy Celia liked to adopt with him.
It's time for lunch, isn't it?
Sky watched his two youngest brothers, Isaac and Vince, carry pails of dirt and rocks to the workers in the river as he stood a few dozen yards away. They were old enough to work now, but Sky wished they chose to enjoy their childhood while they had it. Jay worked in the river panning for precious metals and jewels. It was safe compared to the deep underground mines found throughout the Isles. There was no need to worry about caves collapsing atop them or potential explosions from the gases that leaked up from underground. He didn't worry about their safety this summer, but winter could just as easily welcome death. Clusters of workers were scattered as far as his eyes could see. When Jay spotted his older brother watching them from afar, he spoke to one of the men who waved him off. Jay was tall and lean. His sun-streaked brown hair stuck to his dirt-spattered face. At a glance, nobody could tell that he and Sky were brothers. But if they looked close enough, they could see that the slant of their almond-shaped eyes was the same, as were their strong jaw and cheekbones.
It's been a while since you came to this part of the river, brother. What have you packed for us today?
Not in the least tired, though half the day's work had passed, Jay spoke with a tone that mirrored his personality, sunny and casual in a way Sky could only manage around a handful of people. Sky smiled. Jay knew him too well. Sky brought the bundle of lunch boxes from behind his back. The employers catered to the miners each afternoon, but Sky wanted to speak to his brothers before they got home and were too exhausted to listen.
You'll find out soon enough. I was wondering if you and the boys can take half an hour off.
He motioned toward their younger brothers as they ran back to fill empty pails. Jay studied Sky intently.
The last time you had that look in your eyes, it was because Kayla insisted on paying you more for your companionship. Please don't tell me you got into another argument with her.
Sky sighed.
Not an argument. Quite the opposite, in fact. We've come to an understanding that will make things fair. I just want to discuss what all that entails for all of you.
Jay's troubled expression softened.
I'll get the boys. Go ahead and set everything up over there.
He pointed to the tents where the workers often took their breaks. As Sky did so, he couldn't help remembering his time river mining. It was years ago when he was a child, before he'd met Kayla. The months leading to his impromptu introduction into the workforce had been harsh and distressing. With a mother lost at sea and a father on his sickbed, Sky took charge of his brother's well-being. He started working to feed them before he turned 10. Not long after, the DeSola family and Kayla, in particular, helped get them off the streets. Though it had been 7 years, he constantly had to see that they were eating properly. Not being able to fend for his family while he'd suffered with hunger pangs ranked as one of his most common nightmares. He wouldn't be surprised if they were tired of him trying to mother them. The bamboo lunch boxes were filled with smoky grilled herring, pickled vegetables, and rice seasoned with vinegar and dried seaweed. He also pulled out some sweet oranges, pears, and apples he'd found in the larder.
Brother, look what I found!
Isaac ran up to Sky and opened his clenched fist. The boy smiled as he revealed a hefty piece of platinum ore that gleamed dully in the early afternoon sun. Finding such a large piece was almost unheard of in this river, but Isaac usually had no trouble unearthing valuables anywhere. Skye inhaled sharply and picked up the stone. It took up half his palm and was heavier than he'd expected. He hadn't worked in the mines long enough to judge, but the piece could sell for anywhere between a week to a month's wages if Isaac was smart about it.
How do you do it, Isaac? Keep this up, and Jay and I won't need to work anymore.
Skye returned the stone to Isaac. When Isaac tilted his head to see the table of food, he grinned.
We all know it's not the money that keeps you close to Kayla. You enjoy being with her. I like looking for rocks. And I absolutely love you and the food you brought.
Vince wrinkled his nose and scoffed.
You weren't exactly singing his praises when he forced us to attend classes with Jay.
Skye ruffled his two youngest brothers' muddy brown hair and bent down slightly so they were all at eye level.
It's not all that bad, is it?
Isaac shook his head and elbowed Vince in the ribs before he could open his mouth again.
Don't mind him, brother. He likes to complain because we get tired after class.
Learning new things will give you options in the future. Money, and all the necessities it can buy, might not be a problem at the moment, but you'll never know what might happen.
Skye had a flashback of the scant amount paid to him for a day's work when he'd been carrying pails of dirt as a child. He could barely pay for 2 meals a day for 3 small boys while he'd lived off the hunk of bread and jerky that was due to any river miner.
Let's eat. I'm sure you won't mind switching up your usual lunch fare today for something more palatable.
You read my mind, didn't you? I was just telling Jay that we should pack some soup to soften our jerky sandwiches.
Isaac's green eyes brightened at the spread laid out for them.
No, brat. I just care enough to know your preferences.
Not as much as you care for Kayla, I bet.
Vince snickered. He picked up the utensils that were slipped into the side of the box before he dug in.
All right, that's enough.
Jay said. His lips twitched as he slid onto the bench next to Vince.
Why? Isn't that why Skye asked to talk to us today? He's going to marry Kayla.
Skye was glad he'd not yet taken a bite of his food, or he'd be cleaning it off the table. He stared at Vince.
Marriage? What makes you think we're getting married? I haven't even kissed her yet.
But you do want to kiss her.
The mischievous look in Vince's gray eyes mirrored Jay's. He puckered his lips and got a light slap on the back of his head for the trouble.
It's not polite to tease the person who prepared your meal. He might poison you next time.
Jay didn't even try to contain his amusement now.
So, brother, what did you actually want to discuss with us?
Kayla's leaving Ederic soon, and I was wondering how all of you would feel if I went with her.
Skye took a breath before continuing.
I've discussed it with Kayla and Celia, and they've assured me that most of my wages as Kayla's companion will go directly to you. It's just...
Isaac looked up.
Does that mean she won't be sending toys to us each month?
Vince whacked Isaac's hand with the back of his spoon.
We weren't supposed to tell him about that.
Skye couldn't help letting out an exasperated sigh, and absently fiddled with the wolf charm around his neck.
I already found out about it a few weeks ago. I asked her to stop, and so it will. I can't have my brothers grow up so spoiled. I've already failed to teach you proper respect.
Before they got into another argument, Jay intervened.
As much as she tries, gifts do not make up for the time we get to spend together. I don't begrudge either of you that. You need to be there with your companion and fulfill your end of the contract. I've seen how protective you are of each other, and I envy your connection. I think I can speak for all of us when I say you don't need to worry when it comes to our well-being.
Isaac and Vince nodded their agreement and continued eating as if Skye's decision was the most normal thing in the world. Then again, this wasn't the first time. Both Jay and Skye had left their brothers for a few months, and the younger brothers would soon be doing the same in the months and year to come. The exploration, the rite of passage, just about every desolate islander took before they turned 13, was a time spent traveling, searching for work, and learning worldly skills. Although everybody was encouraged not to stray out of the isle from which they were born, it often took months before they came back home to either settle down or tell their families their intentions for the future. Their lives grew from there, but most children who grew up without the influence of family craftsmanship turned to one of the three main occupations: mining, seafaring, or soldiering. Jay had chosen to work the mines, and Sky had become Kayla's companion. So far, neither had any regrets straying away from their father's occupation as an artisan. As Sky bid farewell to his brothers after they'd helped him clear the table, he was sure that he wouldn't regret anything as long as he could stay by Kayla's side.